like a big group with lights. I'm Keith. And I teach meditation here at Transformations. I bring 22 years of experience of sitting by myself to the table. And the two things that you can hear me say most often is sit with it and how do you know and how does it feel? Those two things go together. So when you tell me you're angry and I ask you, how do you know? And then you go, well, Ted's an ass. And then it's like, well, how does that feel? And that's super annoying. And the reason I ask you that is because you haven't thought about it. And some of you that used to be with me every day haven't thought about it since you left. So I'm here to remind you that it's about the physiological feeling of sadness, not the story about sadness, because the right side of your brain doesn't care about the story. So the reason we bring this up is because sadness, fear, loneliness, all these things you've been pushing them away, you've pushed life away. So when you were sad, you replaced it with something else. When you were fearful, you replaced it with something else. When you were happy, you weren't happy enough. You could have been happier. When it was a good time, it wasn't good enough. So you had to make it better. So I see addiction as the acute inability to sit with what is. And through meditation, that's what we do. It is not about turning thoughts off. It's not about thinking good thoughts. I have bad thoughts all day. I'm having bad thoughts now. That's what it is. It's sitting with what is. But it's about realizing that the thought is just a thought. It's nothing. And the problem with grabbing a hold of these thoughts, I'm teaching you guys meditation without actually doing it because we only have 10 minutes. So the problem with grabbing a hold of every thought that you have is that it's not real, for starters, and it's a memory. And what we know about the human memory is that that's not real either. So your thought leads to a mindset, and that mindset leads to an emotion, and you take that emotion and you lash out at somebody else with it, or you do something wildly unskillful. And I say unskillful instead of good or bad or righteous or evil because that's all relative, right? Sometimes good and bad just depends on what line in the sand some guy drew 300 years ago. So the idea of sitting with what is something that we don't do. So what we do know through several Ivy League studies is that they took 2 meditation teachers, 9 students, and they scan their brains. And they find out that the frontal lobe is lit up, concentration centers are larger, and they're like, okay, well, that's just them. So they took several people with no meditation experience, taught them the same thing. So for a couple days, twice a day, between 12 and 20 minutes, I don't believe it even takes that long, scan their brains again. Lo and behold, these people have the same brain as the other person. Now, that doesn't mean that you turn around tomorrow and do it because we all know sugar's bad for us. So we still do it. But the point is that I want you to at least think about thought, to at least notice that you're thinking. So these thoughts come, and when we sit with them, the thoughts come up, and we label it as thinking, and then we go back to the breath. And that breath looks like in through the nose, down into the belly. The belly expands because we breathe out, and we relax the belly on the exhale. And now the piece that never gets talked about, that they talked about in 11,000 BC, but for some reason in 2018 we've just shut it out, is that the bottom of the exhale, where you sit, that's the sweet spot. And that's where you wait for the body to do its next breath. It's not about you forcing the body. It's not about you forcing anything. It's all very calm. Thoughts come up. There's a breath. We wait for the next thought. And it might be thinking, right? Does anyone here have racing thoughts? They'll never stop. Does anyone here think bad thoughts? Probably never stop. That's the thing. It's just thinking, and it's just happening. And that need to control everything, that need to push it all away, that's kind of what got you here. That's what gets everybody here. But the only problem is that, unfortunately, your thing was culturally unacceptable. But the rest of the world that you're looking at and thinking, oh, I wish I just had that. They don't have it either. So what we have in the first noble truth is that life in the human form involves perpetual dissatisfaction. We're always dissatisfied. We wake up, we're laying on the left side, laying on the right side, you go to the bathroom, hungry, I gotta get something to eat. Gotta go to work because I have to have a place to live. And it's subtle, but then it gets bigger, right? And so what is the second truth? The second truth is that there's grasping and clinging, and that perpetuates the dissatisfaction. The grasping of, if I only had, if I could just, God, Clayton's got I wish I had right? And then the clinging, because once we get the thing, we're going to hold on to it. And sometimes the thing changes its mind, and you're not what the thing wanted. Sometimes the thing changes, and that's not what you wanted. Sometimes the thing divorces you. Sometimes the thing's transmission falls out of it on the way home from work, and you have to borrow Terry's car. Right? But if we're clinging to these things, it's all impermanent. It's all impermanent. Happiness is impermanent. Sadness is impermanent. It sounds bleak, but it's not. Because if you can take it as it comes and it goes, and you're not attached to it, it's not about pushing on it, right? Because if I go rub up on a tree, the only thing gets raw is me. Like, I'll get raw. So if we push against life, we get raw. We get wore out. Is anyone here wore out? Shit, I'm wore out. So it's about grasping, clinging, and understanding that that's what you're doing. Because if we try to fix a car without knowing how it works, then we just stand outside and we kick the tires until the check engine light shuts off. And we all walk around this mind and this brain, and we don't even ask how it works or why it works. We just think, if I just had a thing, then my brain would stop doing the thing. If I could just get over here, then my brain would stop acting crazy, and that's not the case. You're going to take your problems over there. You know, it's like in caseload, when your therapist says something crazy to you, something you perceive as to be crazy, and you get up because it triggered something, and you run out the door, you just dragged your trigger out the door with you. You didn't change anything. So as we push things away, they don't go anywhere. That's how the brain works. That's how trauma works. You just push it away, it waits for you for later. And then it comes back. Because we've all tried to push sadness away. Has anyone here tried to push sadness away? It worked for a couple hours, right? And then here we are again, still lonely. So as long as we push it away and we don't allow the body and the brain to process it, it keeps coming back. That's what sitting with the feeling is. If you sit with the feeling, then it allows it to run its course, and you get through it. That breaks off the sharp points, that rounds the edges, and then it's just, yeah, it happened. Well, it's done, and we're good. But if we keep pushing it away, it just stays. So the left side of the brain goes, person here, person not here, got it. Right side of the brain goes, person here, not here, feel sad. And we don't like sadness, so we push it away. So if we can sit in a meditative way and allow thoughts to run their course and allow these things to come up and allow these bad memories to bubble up and all this stuff comes up and we just sit with it without the story of how you got wronged and what you think happened, and just sit with that, then we get through it. And also when you end up in difficulty and you start to feel that tension, you know that you can sit with it because it'll pass. It passes. So many of you are nodding your heads, but did you let it pass? Just stuff it down with something. Yeah. It's okay, because I stuff things down with the office all the time. That's my thing. I come home and I stare at the office until I feel better. And then I go do my work. So that's what it is. So it's the grasping and the clinging and the constantly pushing things away. And the meditation would be sitting with what is. It's not about turning off the mind. It's not about you relaxing. We do these meditation retreats. If you could turn the volume up on everyone's brain, it would sound crazy. Be like, my foot hurts. When's lunch? Did I turn the stove off? That girl looks like my ex. She was horrible. God, she lied. Could have done better. And now we got a story about a thing. And we all do it. The Hyundai looks like the X's, and so we start the story about the X, all based over a car, and the next thing you know, you're stopping by their work. But we can train the mind to do differently, because at one point, I didn't like split pea soup, and now I do. I learned to like it. If you competed in a sport, at one point you hated a certain activity and you learned to like it. So we can learn differently. We have to take the time to train the mind to do differently, because we're only experiencing our mind. That chair, that experience of that chair, Marty, that's your mind. Because somebody else in here is experiencing the same chair and like, this is awful. But Marty seems fine. Right? That's all. It's just your mind.